it all means the same thing. You know, it was a great role that gave me lots of access. So I knew who was coming in, I knew all the producers that were coming in, I knew all the writers that were coming in, I had access to cuts, I had access to scripts. And you know, I was vocal about what I wanted to do. I would always, you know, not obnoxiously, but to tell people, you know, I'm really interested in doing this for a living, and eventually people would start to ask my opinions on scripts and on writers, and you know, what, you know, who were my contemporaries, who had I seen, you know, what was new and exciting. And so when a job came up to become the development manager, that's the other key, is be friends with the people whose jobs you want. Really great tip that someone gave me. So when that job opened up, when that person left, I knew a lot about what their job was. And so the transition was pretty easy. I applied for the job, and again, it was, everybody knew I was interested in this, and you know, there was a test to write coverage on a script, and I didn't have to do that because I'd already been doing it for people for, you know, the last 2 years. And then again, I was in that role for a few years as the development manager, and again, was pretty vocal about wanting to move up and be a pretty, like, so there were, production exec job was open and they couldn't find someone to fill it. And they kept doing these interviews and they couldn't find someone. I think they interviewed about 3 times, they couldn't find someone. And at the time, the person who was hiring wasn't necessarily willing to you know, move me into that job, which is fine, but then serendipitously, that person left, and the right people, like, I'd spoken to the right people, and they knew that I was interested in that job. And I mean, it helped because I was already execing, you know, projects in development, and again, I knew our content, I knew who we were working with, so I moved into that role, and that was about 6 years ago.
Yeah, you know what, sometimes it really helps to just make it known what you want, right? Makes a big difference. So in your time at the CBC, obviously you've read and evaluated a lot of pitches. So I'm wondering if you can offer some insight into what makes a really great pitch, and then also what to avoid.
So a verbal pitch, a really good verbal pitch is, imagine the best movie you've seen, and you're talking to your friend and you're telling them that story, and you want to get them excited about it. That's always a really good verbal pitch. I always want to know, you know, why are you interested in telling this story? What are you drawn to about this story? You know, and then you go through the characters, the world, what some of the episodes might look like. But really, it's like you want to have that conversation with someone, you know, so that you feel like you're talking to a friend, and you know, you're trying to get me to go see that movie or watch that TV show. So that's, in a verbal pitch, that's what you look like. Also be on time, read the room. If people are looking at their watches going, like, you know, maybe time to wrap it up. And then a written pitch, you know, we always look at character, story, and the writing. And then this is just like a pet peeve that I have, is don't put white type on black background, because it really hurts my eyes. That's just me personally. But I mean, but a more useful tip is, all we care about is the words on the page. Like, it's not, you don't need to go out and print it on glossy paper and, you know, pay a graphic designer, or, you know, put a bunch of time and effort. Like, what we care about is the words on the page and the story.
So something more clear, concise, yeah, simple. So can you take us then through the process of, you know, you get that script, and then getting the green light to production? Like, what are some of the main hurdles and steps that need to be taken in order for a project to reach production?
Right, so CBC, obviously the public broadcaster, 85% of our content is Canadian content, which is very different than, you know, everybody, all the private broadcasters. So we do commission a lot more, but at the same time, we get a lot more. So on average, the drama department receives about 500 pitches. a year, and those come in through our independent producers website, so cbc.ca/IP. It's a great place to go if you want to learn what we're looking for, and that's all departments. And then that's also, we get that through agents, through writers themselves, through producers. So it's about 500 a year, and that's just drama. And then, maybe our development slate is about 40 to 50 projects a year. And again, like, that's more than what the privates are doing. And then we have about 9 shows in production on the air right now. Maybe 2 or 3 slots open up. So it's the numbers are a bit scary and daunting, but I mean, that's the reality of the situation, is it's competitive. When we're in development, we're looking at, obviously, always first and foremost the quality of the story, but then we're also looking at where does it fit in the network. So do we have something that might be similar? Does another department have something that's similar? Something in unscripted, something in comedy. Do we have an acquisition that might be the same thing? It happens all the time, and so that could work against you. We're also looking at how the people are to work with, and it's not a read on someone. It's more about are they susceptible to notes, and not saying like, you have to do everything I tell you to do, but if a note is coming at you, like, how are you receiving it, and how are you going to implement it? And if you don't want to implement it, that's fine, but like, can you articulate why you don't want to? And we're always open to that conversation, because when you're in production, things are moving fast, and you really want to make sure that that person is going to be easy to work with, because it's not just like creative notes, it's also like standards and practices notes. It's also like, we just can't do that, or we have a similar storyline on another show, whatever it may be. But yeah, so we always are weighing everything against each other, like against the other projects, but also just creatively, like, what is the strongest? And we also have a mandate. So, does it feel like it belongs on the public broadcaster?
So I read a quote of yours online that I thought was really interesting, where you said that there is a lot of pressure to represent people of color and be that voice at the table, and it finally feels like we have people's ear when it comes to representation in the industry. Can you speak a little bit about that pressure that you felt?
Still feeling like that. Sorry, it's funny because I was joking with you backstage, and I was like, it's the first time anybody's ever done any research on me. A quote online, what is out there about me? It's always difficult. Okay, so when I first started working at the CBC 10 years ago, I was like one of 2 or 3 people of color who worked there. Just pretty, like, it's...
In the whole CBC?
Well, in my department. And eventually, changes were made. And it was funny because the other people of color were working in finance. Like, we were really in the creative roles, and they were just like, oh, this is strange. But, now it's definitely way more balanced, way more representative of Toronto. Because, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, you cannot walk outside your door and go, like, that's not representative, and we're supposed to be representing the country. But that pressure that you face of I'm one person, and I'm a small cog in the machine, and so I don't always get to make the decisions. I don't always I can speak to things, and I do fight for my projects, but it is tough, and especially because I would do a lot of panels, and people would always ask, like, what's going on with CBC, like, why does it not reflect like our reality? And that was always difficult. It was always a difficult conversation to have, because it's like you have your own personal feelings, but then you also kind of have to speak to, your employer. So it's always like a tricky balance, and I do feel like things are definitely getting better, and people are more willing to listen. But it is still a struggle.
And so is there a project that you greenlit or that you've worked on that has been one of your personal favorites?
yeah, but I can't talk about it because this just happened this week, and it's hard to pick your favorite child. And also, and that's the thing, so I don't actually get to greenlight things. Like I work on things, in development and in production, but the pickups and the renewals, that's not up to me. Like again, I can speak to those projects, but ultimately, there's not millions, but there's dozens of people above me who are making those decisions. So something did get a creative green light this week, and I'm very excited about it, but I can't talk about it. But it is something that a project that is a pleasant surprise, and honestly some of the best writing I've read in 10 years of working at CBC. So I'm really hoping, fingers crossed, that it gets made, and a year from now I can talk about what it is.
So tune into the CBC.
In a year.
Yeah.
Please watch.
So my last question before I open it up to the audience, do you have any advice or words of wisdom to writers in the room or filmmakers or aspiring filmmakers?
Yeah, I mean, be passionate. I think one of the biggest mistakes people do when they come in to pitch a project is they come in with something that they think that the CBC wants, and you can just tell. You can tell when somebody doesn't love that project, and it's like, why would I want to spend a year? Why do you want to spend a year working on that project? Why would I want to spend a year with you working on that project if you don't believe in it? Be passionate, be collaborative. TV is so collaborative, and you need to learn how to work with people. And so I mean, if you're sharing your materials and your ideas with people, if you are in development, with the CBC, it's always a collaboration. It's always a discussion. It's never a dictatorship. And I think that's a common misconception, is that we tell people what to do and they have to do it. We always do want to have that discussion. And I've had discussions with writers and directors about what they feel, and if they can tell me why, if I'm not getting it, because sometimes maybe it's not coming through, and if they explain it to me and they say, well, it's going to be a visual thing, then that helps. But it's also that conversation of well, it's not coming through, it's not on the page, so why isn't that? And maybe think about that. But yeah, be passionate, be collaborative, and just keep at it, because I can't tell you how many people how many talks, and I work with a lot of students as well, and I'm always email, follow up, people want to hear from you, and so it is a bit of persistence as well.
There was all these things, so could you maybe talk a little bit about the sort of hierarchy of development at CBC?
Yeah, sure. So it depends on what you come in with when you're pitching. So if somebody comes in with a script that's already written, and if it's a pilot script, we can go, okay, well, we'll order a rewrite on the pilot and then a new episodic script, as well as a Bible, or a series overview document. So typically what happens is you have a story pitch, and then you move to outline, then you move to first draft, second draft, polish. You don't, depending on the script, sometimes you don't even do the second and polish. It's just the first draft might be, what it is. It might be good enough. And then the other side of it is if somebody comes in with, something that might be like a book or a pitch that is really fleshed out, we might just say, well, let's just see what a script looks like. So does that make sense? Does that answer the question? Is that...
Yeah, I guess it's you're kind of moving up in stages based on where the project's at.
Yeah, and we have different phases of development. So phase 1 is typically a Bible and a pilot script. And if we like it, we'll order, we'll do a second phase and order a couple more scripts. If we're on the cusp of going to production, we'll do another phase to do a financing scenario or a budget. Or maybe, do some preliminary casting, depending on what the project calls for. But yeah, it's typically, first phase, Bible and pilot, second phase, additional scripts. And usually just outline, first draft, second draft. And the Bible, we usually will do, a pass on it if we have notes. So it's usually just the Bible and then a polish on it.
So how many stages typically will like an average show that gets made go through from the time you can pitch them, whether it's like submit to your website or talk to an executive, to getting it on air?
Yeah, that's like, how long is a piece of string? It really does depend. I mean, like, we have a show that's coming up in the winter, Fortunate Son, that was in development for like 2 years, and then by the time it's airing, it got the green light last spring, so another year. So it's like, it's been with us for like almost 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
so it can be a very, very long process.
But can it also be short?
Yeah, it can be short. I mean, it just depends on like how much it is. And the thing is, our development cycles are always tied to the CMF funding, so Canadian Media Fund. So it might just be, and usually everything that comes in, we want to have a producer because that's how we access our funding. So it might just be, you know, if something comes in, ideally something comes in February, March, and we put it into development, and then they're finished their first phase of development in the summer, and we have time to order another script, and we get it, you know, in there by October, November, and we have a full package, and then we can read and make decisions in the new year. So it can be as short as, you know, less than a year. It can be as long as 2 or 3 years.
First of all, I would just say it's very nice to meet you. I've read some stuff on you, very good stuff, and I just can't believe that you've been doing this for 10 years because you look like you just came out of college. Right? So I have a half-hour pilot, a comedy that I'm working on. I'll just say very quickly. Basically, it's a single-camera workplace comedy. It takes place at a collections agency where hopes and dreams go to die. And so my question is, A, how can I come in? Do I need to make an appointment if I would like to pitch to you? Do I need a literary agent? And also, if I've already had a cast, because I'm working on The Sizzler right now, and if you don't like the cast, like let's say you're interested in the project, do you get your own cast? Do you do your own audition sessions?
Right. So I only work in 1 hour dramas, but I can speak a bit
We
to
can
that.
pass it around.
It's funny. I do kind of. I will say I'm like the wayfinder of CBC. I can always figure out who you need to talk to. So the cast thing, that is a tricky thing, because I've only ever seen it work in comedy, because it is something like, you know, with Baroness von Sketch. They came in with the Baronesses, obviously. Like something like Working Moms, they came in with a Sizzler, and not all of that cast is in the cast. So we always want to be involved in the casting process. When we greenlight something to production, like we have approvals on that, and you know, typically, you know, that's something that we do. I mean, we're always open to people, and it really depends. So, like, it can hurt you or it can help you depending on the strength of that cast.
Right.
In terms of coming in for a pitch meeting, again, like, because of how we access our funding, having a producer is key, because like that's how we fund our development, is through CMF. So if you have a producer, that's great, and the producer can make an appointment to come in and pitch.
Good, yeah.
But there's also always, I mean, we always say, like, you can send in your written pitch. Again, there is a person on the other side of that IP site.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not, I used to be the person on the other side of the IP site. So it's a person, it's not a robot. And you will get a response. I mean, it does take a bit longer. Again, we get 500 pitches. So like comedy will get 500 pitches. We get 500 pitches in drama. So it might take a bit longer, but it's that way as well. And then the other thing is, like, you know, coming out to events like this and meeting people. Like, our execs are always out at film festivals, at, you know, doing speaking engagements. Yeah, so that's also another way to kind of find your way in.
Right, so, and I was thinking, let's say I was coming in, have my producer, and I want to pitch it. Now, would I need the Sizzler or a series Bible with all the characters? Would that be enough? And the actual pilot script?
So, okay, if you're a writer that we haven't read before, a pilot is helpful, because again, like, that's gonna help us know who you are.
Okay.
Again, I don't know if this is, like, for comedy it is a bit different. Like if there's something, you know, that's gonna be interesting about the tone, then a sizzle reel could help. But it's not necessary. Like again, what I said earlier is it's really always words on the page. Like that's always what we're looking for, because that, again, that year of development is just words on the page.
Right, because I was just thinking, like, is, if you do a sizzler, is that more of like a stronger marketing tool to show what you have, or not necessarily?
It really depends on how good the sizzle reel is.
I see, okay.
Right? So I think, you know, if you do it and it's great and it's funny and this is, if you feel like that's the best showcase for your show, but you always are gonna wanna have a pitch document to go along with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and whatever you're using for your skin, I'm just gonna say. That's a secret, because, yeah, you look gorgeous.
It's jeans and an oily face.
Thank you.
But what I want to ask is co-production, because it's set, it's Irish and Canadian, and it just, there's like Ottawa, and there's Rideau Ferry and Big Rideau, like all these places I know, and I was just looking like, oh my God, like you feel like you're in it because you can picture yourself in all these places. So it's just so exciting to me, and it's like, thank God you're here, I have somebody to ask these questions. But and I'm a producer, I have a production company, Wild Maple Films, but I've already talked to trying to connect with producers in Ireland. Would that be something, like how would that work? Like, do you do co-productions?
Yep, we do.
Okay,
Yeah.
so cool. So I think it's actually more of a mini-series than a 1 hour thing, because it would suck people in and they would love the story,
Yeah.
right? Like it builds.
Yeah, we do
So-
a lot of co-productions, and we've done a lot of co-productions with Ireland.
Fabulous.
So we've done, you know, ones that don't necessarily seem inherently Canadian, like things like The Tudors and
Yeah.
we did a few years ago.
Yeah.
And yeah, you know, Canada has, like, I forgot how many co-production treaties we have with different countries, but we're always open to that. We're doing one with New Zealand right now. It's always just an interesting way to finance, and that helps us too.
Yeah.
And especially if it makes sense to the story. The thing that can be tricky with co-productions is finding something that works for both markets. Because again, because we're the CBC public broadcaster, it always has to be.
Locations are all here.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and so something like that sounds like, obviously that would make sense for us, but would Ireland be interested in, like, it is, yeah, so if Ireland would be, then that helps. Because, you know, we've had shows that have been pitched to us that are, you know, are designed to be co-productions, but don't really make sense for us because they're not Canadian enough, and don't make sense for, you know, the other partner because they're not, you know, Australian enough or whatever it is.
But it can be little different bits and pieces, right? Like I have an award-winning actor who's amazing. He's amazing. He's in like the top shows in Ireland, and I have him totally in my head for one of the characters, and so it's like real Irish accents and real Irish people, right? But locations are all here, and it's a Canadian story. I need your card. I need your card. Before you go.
Nice list. Would you do a co-production, but could it be bilingual, like with France, for example? Because I'm writing a TV drama, and it would be maybe, so it would be partly in France and partly in Canada, but it would be in English and French. So I was wondering, could it work, or would it need to be only like in Quebec French and French, or well, because I know you have like Radio Canada, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, would it need to be like Radio Canada, or could it be CBC in English?
I mean,
Subtitles, I would think.
yeah, so it really depends on how much it would, like how much subtitling there would be.
Yeah. Okay.
Like it depends. Like it would be something that we would need to see. Radio Canada SRC might be a better fit for that, just because of, but then their language, you know, needs are different. So yeah, it would just really depend, because we've done stuff with subtitles before, but we don't want it to be too heavily subtitled.
Yeah.
Because it can get a bit tricky.
Program for someone looking to get like production experience. It doesn't have to be at TBC. I was just wondering.
Have you like what kind of production experience are you talking about?
Like it could be like TV or film or just.
Like, are you looking like for PA experience?
Yes.
Like for like entry level experience?
Yes, entry
Yeah.
level, yes.
I know that the City of Toronto and POV 3rd Street just started their PA program, but I'm not sure on the details of that because they're just piloting it now. there are other internships, and POV also, like, I know that they're always trying to do, like, internships as well. Trying to think where else would do it. I mean, I would check and see, like, different film festivals have different programs that have different ways in. But yeah, but I would say POV 3rd Street, I think, is the first one that comes to mind, off the top of my head. Yeah.
Thank you. I was just wondering, in your genre right now, there's certain things that you guys are actually looking for story-wise. Is there certain kinds of stories that you're currently pursuing?
Right, so we're in the middle of like our pickups and renewals right now, and so once those all get complete, then I think we'll have a better idea of what exactly we're looking for, where the holes are. I mean, typically we're looking for, you know, procedurals, but that feel Canadian, so, and also feel contemporary. So Coroner was, which premiered last year, was like a huge hit for us. And that's something that feels, you know, really fresh and really slick and has a sense of place. I know because they shot on location a bunch. They have a lot of locations. And then the other side of it is we're always looking at big IP, so big intellectual property, to do those limited series, so things like the Book of Negroes, Alias Grace, that kind of thing. But it also can be, for those limited series, smaller stories, but that are still tied to the social consciousness of Canada. So last year we did Unspeakable, which was about the tainted blood scandal in the 80s. So that wasn't based on any intellectual property, but it was, you know, based in history and a story that we felt was important to tell.
So when people are reaching out to do their pitch, what do you expect in the initial email? Like, how much information do you want initially on the show? Do you want the Bible and the first email, or do you want
well, what you can do, what's good to do sometimes is a temperature check and say, like, hey, I have a show that's about XYZ. Is this of interest? Because it might be something that we already have or that we don't really do. So, I mean, we don't do a lot of sci-fi.
Hey,
Hi.
I just wanted to ask, could you speak a little bit to new media and how it's affecting things at the CBC and what the CBC is doing to kind of get involved and be proactive about how we've got Netflix, we've got Apple TV, we've got all of these services, and what CBC's stance is on that?
What is our stance on that? I mean, you know, we've partnered with Netflix, and that's no secret. And with Ani, we did with Netflix. You know, we've done other shows with other partners. I mean, the thing is, in Canada, it's hard to get a show made just with, you know, a Canadian license fee and tax credit. So, like, we are always looking at partners. You know, should those big American streamers who are coming in and taking all our crews pay into our taxes? Of course they should. But, you know, in the meantime, I think we are still open to those relationships. Yeah. I mean, also, like, I own I have every streamer service. I have Disney Plus now. Like Disney Plus is like coming next week, and I'm getting it. And I have Amazon. I have Netflix. It's just like it's so much. But there's a lot of great TV out there. But yes, no. To answer the question is, like, we're still open to those relationships for sure.
And I think that's a great way to end the interview. So I just want to thank you again so much, Nicole, for coming and sharing that information. I think that was just a lot of great, useful information for everybody. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
And thank you, Sabine. Thank you so much for asking me to be here. Thank you.
Okay, the next special presentation is Swap by Andre Gaumont. Did I say that correctly? Fantastic. And that's all I'm going to say, because this film speaks for itself, and I would love to get it going so that Nicole can see a part of it. Okay, so sit back, relax, and enjoy.
You're not getting any better.
They've done a good job for me. I love the Canadian actor. I don't know you know, the hologram and the two guys in the lab. So thanks to you.
We're also like freaked out at the concept. It's such a great concept.
Yeah.
Is this something that you just thought of? Like,
Yes,
it's
it's
amazing.
based, in fact, I was reading a small article in the scientist newspaper where they were talking about a journal where they were talking about the government. Now they are trying to transfer brain to a computer. And they were talking about all the elaboration of that and the complexity to bring neurons to 0 and 1. And reading that, I had a flash. I say, well, why don't we transfer neurons to neurons? It will be faster and easier.
Awesome.
Same concept. It was like, so I just remixed the things and I had like flashes and I say, how can I do it just for fun and not too expensive? Well, it was expensive. I decided to say, okay, I want to have international co-production, so I will go around the world just to see that we can do it with any countries. So I took vacation in Tokyo and took a vacation in Bangkok, and after that I went to Paris, and after that I went to New York. And I said, okay, let's shoot the part in Montreal. It was a bit complex to shoot because the two guys were looking at the playback of the things I've done the editing. So each time I was doing the editing of each country, so I came back and I done the editing. I said, okay, it's missing this or that because I was planning to do something, but when you arrive to Tokyo and you find an actor and the guy didn't show up and I have to find my friend, I say, oh, do you know somebody can do it with you? And you find somebody else. And I had the casting in Bangkok, the same story. I had like 8 persons that I was supposed to meet, so I arrived to the meeting, one shows up.
Oh my God.
So I asked him, do you have a friend who can do it? And he found the other guy, so I done it there. But in Paris it was easier, it was really great in Paris. There's a site called cineast.org, and it's a really great site. If you ever shoot in Paris, just ask me, I'll give you all the information. I had like 136 persons sending me their resume and their experience. So the main actor is a singer, he's a great guy. And he's doing a tour now, he's doing the bodyguard, he's singing the role of the bodyguard in the musical, and he's really great. And he done it for free, so yes. And another thing, all my location is Airbnb. So it's where I was staying that I was using. So when I was looking for a location, I didn't have money, so I looked at the Airbnb site and I said, what can I find that looks like Japanese or Paris? I wanted to have a terrace on the building. So we were on the 5th floor, no stairways, no elevator, so you had to climb 5 floors and then bring the equipment and everything.
How big of a crew?
I had, big crew, 3%. But in Montreal, we had a big crew. The shooting in Montreal, I had because I'm from Montreal, so I had a crew of 25 person and everything. It was like the complete set. I had a DOP and I was happy to be directed.
I just want to say that I don't know if you all know, but Andre has already won numerous awards all over the world, everywhere. He's won everywhere.
And you should.
So far, the team is traveling. I'm at 22 awards so far, and I think there's only 3 or 4 festivals that didn't give me an award like this one. Or somebody here tonight, if you want to be co-producer, you are welcome to see me. Question there.
Oui, André, ma question c'est pour vous, je vais dire en anglais. Have you considered making this a series?
Yes, it's a series. It's a bilateral series. In fact, for me, this is a teaser. I was doing it as just to show, like Nicole Hask, to do something to show to the producer. Because right now, my ideas is really more developed, and I wrote the structure the first year, the synopsis of second, the third, and the fourth year. So I really know where it's going. Like Alice is going out of her machine, of course, and in fact she is the copy of the doctor, of John's doctor, because he created her as her image. So it's all the story about her too, the relationship between a doctor with an handicapped guy and the fun task of about, like having somebody just fun created the character looking like his doctor. So there's a lot of things coming up in the story, and yeah. So I wrote the story of the next 4 years. So.
Excellent.
We will have problem, but I couldn't shoot all of that because it was like budget-wise, it was a bit complicated. So I decided to reduce the story as much as I can to be possible to shoot it, and we shot 3 days with the 2 guys and 1 day with the hologram. So even though the hologram was so complicated because she was alone on the green screen, but you have the impression that she is there with them. Yeah. But what I've done is like I've done all the editing of the film before shooting her. So I knew exactly where she had to look, and we had the playback, and she was on set on the green screen, and one green ball was one guy, the other green ball was the other guy, and the screen was another green bar that she has to look at. So it was like a bit complicated for her, but she looks like she is with them.
Who did the VFX?
I have a friend called Stéphane Picat, who is from Montreal, who's done special effects. And I've done a part of it too. I work with him, but when you don't have a budget, you do everything. But he is great. He's done a lot of things. All the things appearing and the things of the hologram. It was really, really great. I was really happy because I had more ideas of the swapping to the universe. So yeah, that in the TV series it would be more elaborate. It would be more like close to what I wanted, but it was like too long to do. It took us 9 months to do the special effect. Just after we finished in December, and the film was ready in September the next year. So it was a long process.
It's really qualitative. Like it's great quality of VFX. It's really good. Yeah. I was impressed.
So if you need somebody, I can refer you a good guy. He is really working and getting involved. So, other question?
How much money did it cost to fly all these places?
The shooting, just for the shooting, traveling and everything, it was around 17,000. 17, 17.
Like including like plane tickets and Airbnb and...
Yeah, about the plane ticket and the food and the things. And the location in Montreal, the big place where we shoot, it was $3,000. It was really expensive for that kind of budget. But the rest, the food for the crew, that was expensive. The insurance, but the rest, everybody was like free. Nobody had been paid.
And the VFX cost you money, or was it like your friend do it for?
It's a friend.
Sorry?
I said it's a friend. A friend.
It's a friend.
A friend, a real friend.
A real friend, no money.
That's really
why
what.
17 is amazing.
But in fact, I want to work with him. We want to sell a series, and if he do the series, he's going to be paid for it, you know.
Is it your first TV show, or have you done anything before?
No, I work in cinema since I'm a kid, so but I was script supervisor. I became a first assistant director, and now I'm directing, writing, producing different things. But it's the first TV series that I want to do. Yes, as a director, right? Producer.
And you live in Montreal, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
But anywhere in the world.
Yeah,
What a great vacation you've had, eh? That was so wonderful, and it seems like everyone needs to ask you something about this film because it was so great. So I'm sorry, I gotta cut you off now, but you'll see him later, and you can ask him as many questions as you'd like to, okay? Thank you so very much. That was really, really good. And I think
once again, I am very excited to introduce our next guest for the Industry Talk. T. Schneider is a creator, producer, and actor based in Toronto and currently the co-chair of the Toronto ACTRA Women's Committee. As a writer, T was a 2019 Talk Short Film Creation Lab finalist, a 2018 Cale Shernan Award finalist, a 2018 Diversity of Voices recipient at the Banff World Media Festival, and a 2010 recipient of the Ontario Creators Reserve. T has had a long-standing commitment to creating work for and about women and underrepresented communities, and has production credits in theater, film, and television spanning 20 years. She's currently developing 2 television series, a feature film that just camera wrapped on her short film, Little Bird. Some of her acting credits include Flashpoint, A Kink in My Hair, This Can Happen to You, Cold Blood, Quarter Life Crisis, and Mighty Machines. T is a member of ACTRA, CAEA, WIFT, and the ACCT. It is my pleasure to introduce T. Schneider. I just want to begin our talk by discussing your role as co-chair of the Toronto ACTRA Women's Committee. So for those that don't know, can you discuss the main purpose and functions of TALK, and how did you get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So TALK is the Women's Committee at ACTRA. It is our mission at TALK is to create initiatives, programs, and opportunities to foster women in key creative roles in the recorded media industry. So, we do all kinds of things to that end. We have all kinds of different programming. We run a short film creation lab throughout the year, which applications are currently open for, and I think we're going to talk more about that later. We run a content development session alongside that, which is basically a number of workshops that help women learn the ins and outs of the process throughout. So we have one on directing, one on producing, one on post and festival, and one on writing throughout the year. And that runs concurrently with the Short Film Creation Lab program. We also have an award gala every year, which is the Nell Shipman Award. And that award is created to honor a woman in the industry who, through her hiring practices or other work in the industry, champions other women's work in the industry. So she might be a mentor, she might be a creator, she might be a producer, she might live in a lot of areas, but essentially she has a body of work that has championed women in the industry. And so that's one of the big initiatives we run every year. In addition to that, we do a number of sessions at the ACTRA conferences twice annually. So I don't know if there are ACTRA members in the room, but we have done over the last 2 years. Yay! So at the conferences we've done, one of the things that's really important to me personally is content creation and having women in key creative roles in content creation. And so based on some of my experiences going to Banff and learning about pitching and learning about the industry, I wanted to bring that back to our members. So we've run a couple of sessions, we call them From Page to Pitch, and they're basically, we started not this fall, but last fall, with a Page to Pitch 1.0, which was basically, an introduction to pitching, how to get your content seen, and how to pitch. And then we did a master class this last fall at the conference, which was extremely well attended. What we've discovered is that we have a lot of member creators, and that women are really passionate about creating work, and that they need opportunities in order to get their work seen and out there, and they need access to executives. And so that's one of the things we do. In addition to that, we do lots of one-off sort of sessions. Like we're looking at doing one on empowerment speaking this year. We one of our members, actually the co-chair, the woman I replaced, is currently working on a child care initiative. So as women in the industry, it's one of the things that we often struggle with in terms of maintaining our careers, or after having children, being able to get out to auditions. So the initiatives we run take a wide range. So one of our members is looking to have a stamp, a Nell Shipman stamp created. So we do all kinds of things to try and promote women in the industry. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely.
How did I get involved? That's the other part of it. So I've been an ACTRA member for about 10, 12 years now, something like that. I've been an actor for 20, I'm not going to say. number of years. I have a 7-year-old who's in the industry, and she's an ACTRA member now. So what prompted me to get involved, when my daughter started earning ACTRA credits, I thought, you know what, she's 7 years old. She's going to be in the industry. It was one thing when it was just me in the industry, but now it's me and my kids. So I got to get involved and make sure that, you know, I'm doing everything I can to make the industry a better place for us. So that's answer to question number 1.
Good job. So there's actually a really great quote of yours that I read online that I thought was really important. I think you really summarized everything really well, why it's so important to have talk, and I'm just going to read it out loud here. Studies have shown conclusively that in order to achieve gender parity and true representation in our industry, we need a top-down approach that includes women of all diversities in key creative and leadership roles. When women are in charge, they hire women. Recorded media contextualizes and even shapes our worldview. Recorded media teaches our children about what to value, how to feel about themselves, and how to treat other people. As storytellers and adults in our society, we share a responsibility to tell great stories that build a purposeful and responsible narrative for all. Representation is key to achieving that ideal. So I just thought that that really highlighted the impact that this really has, that as artists, you know, we do have a responsibility to make sure that everyone is kind of being accounted for in that worldview that's going to affect our children, you know, even just thinking about that. So can you just touch on that a little more, and then what efforts are you making kind of on a day-to-day basis, specifically with the organization, to make sure that, you know, women are being hired in leadership roles and that they are being represented?
Yeah, so so there's 2 parts to that quote that I think that statement that are important. The first part of it is the part about what we see on TV and how much, or not on TV, on the internet, everywhere, what we see in terms of recorded media and how it affects our worldview and how it affects the worldview of children from as young as we can receive that information going forward. I've done a lot of reading on this topic. The Gina Davis Institute has done a number of studies on this. And basically, there are a gazillion stats that we could go to, but essentially the conclusion of the studies that they've done with children, with young girls in particular, is that they have a little catchphrase, which is, if you can see it, you can be it. So if girls don't see themselves represented in certain ways in recorded media, they literally don't believe that they can be those things. And so, essentially we're indoctrinating our children from beginning from the age that they can receive recorded media to either have self-esteem and believe that they can do things or not. And I was doing some more reading on this today, and there are a bunch of stats that say, like, for instance, women might be portrayed in a leadership role, but odds are, if they're going to be portrayed in a leadership role, they're also going to be sexualized. So, can we see, if young women receive that message over and over again, they believe that to be true and core to their existence. So that's the one part of it, which is, we're indoctrinating children. The other part of it is the first half of the statement, which is that the studies have shown conclusively that in order to achieve gender parity, we need women in leadership roles. So Women in View, which is an organization here in Toronto that is currently headed by Jill Golick, put together a study which was released this year, which concluded that when men are in leadership roles, we are not anywhere near parity. If we put women in leadership roles, that number, that piece of the pie increases. If we put women of color in leadership roles, we get to parity. And if we put Indigenous women in leadership roles who have 0% of the pie, then Indigenous women work. So essentially, you know, unless we are willing to have women, and importantly, based on this study, women of color in leadership roles, it's very hard for us to achieve parity. Women hire women. Men, unfortunately, largely don't hire women yet. So that's the second part of it. You know, we need women in those positions, and we need to represent on screen the beliefs and values that we want our daughters to have, and our sons, and so forth. Does that answer that?
And from what I understand as well, what I read on the website was that talk meetings, you do have meetings that are open to ACTRA members, and they don't need to RSVP. Anybody can attend, so you do really want to get the rest of the ACTRA community involved as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Our meetings are held generally on the third Tuesday of the month. We're trying to vary the times. Right now, traditionally, they've been held from 3 to 5 p.m. on the third Tuesday of the month. We're trying to move them earlier in the day to accommodate for people with different schedules. But essentially, if you are an ACTRA member in good standing, female, anywhere on the gender spectrum, or an ally, you are welcome to attend our meetings if you think that this is important to our future as creators and as perpetrators of digital media in our society, which is a more important role than we maybe receive sometimes when we're trying to make our indie projects and our films. And I think that I missed the other part of the question earlier, which was, you know, what are we doing sort of on a day-to-day basis? It's largely an administrative task. We basically all have to roll up our sleeves and create forms and, you know, brainstorm initiatives. We have somebody from the Women's Committee here in the back who's participated a lot, Claudel. You know, it's not sexy work. It's really quite straightforward work. It's, you know, brainstorming ideas. It's actually putting together the forms for submissions. It's, you know, planning the party. It's largely administrative tasks. It's also things though, like, you know, for instance, I alternate on ACTRA Council as often as I can so that I have a voice there. I, as well as a number of women in the Women's Committee, are running for council this year. And I will say this, I won't ask you to vote for me, but I will say that if you are an ACTRA member, your credentials are already in your mailbox. And traditionally, voter turnout is at about 20%, and that's appalling. Women need to engage in the vote at ACTRA like everywhere else in the world. So I urge you to go through your inbox. I think the second round of credentials went out this past week. So find your credentials, read the statements. A lot of people vote based on, you know, hey, there's a famous person that I know. You know, there are a lot of wonderful candidates, and if you read their statements, you're going to see what they're about. Read the statements, maybe start from the back to the front. Everybody starts from the front to the back, and there's a long list of candidates, almost 50 candidates this year vying for 24 positions. But we need representation at the council table at ACTRA. That is a very powerful place to be, and that's where decisions get made, and that's where you know, we can make the change if we have great representation there. And there are, I've been alternating throughout the year at council, and I can tell you that there are brilliant people bringing forth brilliant ideas. And you know, if you read the statement, you're going to get a good idea of what those priorities are that people have. So that's my pitch for please vote in the ACTRA Council election.
So submissions also are currently open for the 2020 Talk Short Film Creation Lab. Can you talk a little bit about that and what the requirements are? I can.
Sorry, my voice is getting a little scratchy. Okay, Short Film Creation Lab is 10 minutes and under. You must be a team of ACTRA members in good standing. Writer, producer, director. Ideally, your film is going to center women's stories being talk. That's, you know, those are the criteria that we're looking at. Ideally, you're passing the bedshell test, which is, you know, you have two women having a conversation. They have to talk about something other than a man in your movie. 10 minutes and under, I said that. There is some flex in terms of the three roles. You know, if you're a writer-director, but you have somebody who's going to co-direct with you, or a double producer team, there's some flex in that, but largely it's an initiative to benefit 3 talk members. This is our one initiative. All of our workshops, all of our content development sessions are open to women and men. This is our one initiative that is a female-only submission, but female identifying anywhere on the gender spectrum and of all diversities, always. We really, really push for 50-50 behind the camera as well. So that's an important aspect, you know, if you're applying and you're writing your pitch, we're pushing for 50-50 behind the camera. And you need to work with talk as your partner in producing. It's produced under the ACTRA co-op program. And as an aside to that, I will just dispel any stuff that's out there in the industry that the TIP program at ACTRA is canceled. It is not. It is under renovation, in case that rumor has gotten out there right now, that the TIP program is under renovation. Co-ops are currently functioning as per usual.
And so for those submissions, does everyone on your crew and a part of your team, do they all have to be ACTRA?
No.
The core members have to be ACTRA. You know, you're gonna have a heck of a hard time finding a DOP that's ACTRA, and you know, the crew members, we partner with our community partners to get the films made, but those 3 key roles must be ACTRA members, yeah.
Awesome. So, aside from the Toronto ACTRA Women's Council, you are keeping very busy with your own projects, like I was mentioning in the introduction. Can you tell us more about what you've been working on?
Yes. So I just wrapped on a short film. It's been a crazy year. I like many people in Canada, in this industry, wear a lot of hats. So I write. And I started writing when I was in another decade, when I started to see that the roles were, you know, that the work out there wasn't representative of what I wanted to do in the industry. And I came up in theater, so I started writing plays. And then I moved over after I had my daughter and I came back to the industry, I had a couple of colleagues that had made films. These dudes that I knew who were wonderful gentlemen, they made great films, both of them, and I thought, I can do that. So then I started screenwriting, and so as you heard, I have a couple of TV series that I've been developing for quite a long time, and I went through a whole crazy, has anybody been through an option negotiation in this room? So I went through that this year, it fell through. I went through a writer's agreement this year, it fell through, after like many, many months of negotiation. So I needed to embark upon something that I could finish and that was within my control. And so last year, for the Short Film Creation Lab, I submitted a script. And it went through a bunch of development this year. And we just wrapped camera on that, not this past weekend, the weekend before. And so now we're in our edit phase. We've had some challenges, as films have. We've had sound challenges, as films often do. And we're working our way through that now. So that's sort of been my year. And now we're trying to make some festival deadlines that we really, really wanted. I drummed up some nice relationships at TIFF this year with some programmers. So we're trying to make those deadlines now. But challenges, yes. Hashtag challenges.
Yeah, speaking of challenges, you know, with such a busy schedule like that, what does balance look like to you? Like, how do you find balance, kind of juggling all those hats? I know for myself, that's definitely something that I struggle with.
Yeah. There's no balance. There's no balance. You know what? My 7-year-old keeps me balanced because there are things that are absolutely routine in our life. She goes to school during the week. We've got homework. You know, grade 3 is a mass. I don't know how many of you have kids. Grade 3, there is a massive amount of math homework. It's unbelievable. So those things pull me away from this crazy world. But also, like, those things keep me grounded in reality and in life, you know, like she's in the industry, but at the same time, you know, there was Halloween and there was auditions and, you know, we had to have a talk about it. And she said, no, I want to go to my costume karate class. She's a green belt in karate, and they were doing dress up karate. Well, that was more important, you know, so the kids are great for keeping balance. I mean, people say, you know, you can't do both in this industry. I'm not gonna lie, it's definitely challenging, but there are definitely riches that one gets by having a child and being in this industry at the same time. So I'd say that most of the balance comes from her requirements, her needs to be a kid and a 7-year-old kid, and periodically trips to wine country.
Sounds good to me. I'm going to open it up now to the audience. Does anybody have a question for T?
Sabine.
When you say that you making some connection to submit to TIFF, what kind of connection did you make, and how did you, because it's pretty big, TIFF.
Yeah, so what I did was I went to TIFF this year with an industry pass, and I utilized my delegates list to the max, and I reached out to every short film programmer that I thought would be a good programmer for my short film, which was at that point in pre-production, and I got meetings, and I had a little teaser for my short film, and I had a package that was a treatment, and I sat down with them, or in some cases I communicated with them over email, and I pitched them my short film and why I thought it would be a good program for them, and I got some invites to submit based on that. And so now we're trying to make those deadlines. One in particular that we're really trying to make. My film is a film from a child's perspective, and there's a festival that is particularly great for that, and so that's what I did basically. Any festival, any place that you go, like if you go to Banff, you get a delegates list, and I hear people say over and over again, you know, I went to Austin, I went to this place, I went to that place, I didn't meet anybody. They said I was going to meet producers. They said I was going to be. You have to use the delegates list. You have to reach out to people ahead of time and try and get meetings. And you know, there's a good phased way of doing that, which is, you know, you tell them a little bit about yourself, tell them a little bit about your project, and start a dialogue. Don't overwhelm them, don't send them your pilot, don't send them your stuff, your Bible, your this, your that, just a little bit to get them interested, and then open a dialogue. And I've found a lot of success that way in making connections with people, so that's what I did there.
And I have another question. Do you find that you have more role as an actor since you produce your own thing? Do you see that there's this like a little change in your role that you're booking or something like that?
No, I don't, to be perfectly honest. But there's a reason for that. I could be more successful. Invariably what happens is that I write all these roles for myself, but then I get so busy in the production aspect that 9 times out of 10, I end up giving my role away to somebody else in order to get through them. I know, but you know, you can only do so many jobs. And so I don't play the roles that I've written for myself as often as I should. But I've gotten other things, you know, like as a writer, and now as a first-time film director. You know, there are other things that you get from that. But no, I don't play the roles that I write for myself enough. But you know, I will say, like, if there's filmmakers in this audience, there is a wealth. One of the things that I'm very passionate about, that I talk a lot about at ACTRA and around the council table and in the community and online, is that women of a certain age are really underrepresented on our screens, like, in fact, invisible. And as young filmmakers, what you may not have considered is that, you know, if you write a great part for a woman of a certain age, of which our industry is full, there are so many experienced lifelong actors that have been in this industry, that have honed their skills, that are amazing actors, that are underutilized. You will get performance gold, you know, way more than you might in other demos. So write great parts for women of a certain age and give them names. Not like the kooky neighbor next door, not like give them actual names, make them people. They are people. They can be sexy, they can be, you know, they can be powerful, they can be leaders, they can be all of the things that you might, you know, that media has taught you, ingrained in your mind over a lifetime, that should be written as a man's role. Write roles for women of a certain age. I continue to struggle. Yeah, I continue to struggle how to word that. I was in a clothing store dressing room today, and this woman came out. She had this dress on. She looked great in the dress, and she just about like collapsed with disappointment at how she felt that she looked in the mirror, and she just launched into this monologue about being 60 and where have the years gone, and she said 60 like it was the worst possible thing ever. And I had this moment where I thought, like, we've really inculcated our society to believe that it is an awful thing to be an older woman. So let's collectively, we can change that. We actually have storytellers have the power to change that. I digressed, I think.
What are some of the pros and cons of being with ACTRA?
Okay, so I worked non-union for a lot of years before I joined ACTRA. You will have people say to you things like, you know, there's more work non-union, you need to build your craft non-union, you need to build your skill, you're going to go into a larger pool if you join the union. I had opportunities on both sides of the fence, I have to tell you. But at the end of the day, what made me decide to make the move over was that the opportunities that I was getting, yes, maybe they were more plentiful, but they were less respectful. They were, you know, you'd be told one thing going out, you'd arrive on set, they'd have you sign off on thing, it was supposed to be 3 years, it's in perpetuity. Like, you have no protection. You are just a freelance person. Now, does that mean sometimes you don't get lucky? For sure. I got flown to Argentina first class, you know, to shoot a commercial there for a number of days when I was non-union. It was a great gig. They treated us like gold. It doesn't mean that those opportunities don't exist, but you have no protection. So for one opportunity like that, I'm probably going to do 10 where I'm not being treated as respectfully as I will be treated as an ACTRA member.
I asked that question because I know a few people that's in the business, and I've heard many of the stories like what you're saying. So on that note, would you recommend that somebody that aspires to be an actor, they join ACTRA right away, or would you recommend them being independent for a number of years and then join an ACTRA?
So it's a complex question. Your agents are going to push you to stay non-union because they want to make the money from that piece of the industry. My feeling is that if you want to be a professional in the industry, you should join the professional association that represents you, that gives you credibility as a professional. I'm not saying that there are not wonderful, talented actors that are non-union. I was one of them for many years. But I'm saying if you want to be treated like a professional and thought of as a professional, my recommendation would be to join the association. ACTRA is looking at lots of different things in terms of how the membership works and the crediting system and all of that. I heard lots of counselors at the last meeting. At the last council meeting, there was Blue Sky where people put forth all of their ideas, in terms of priorities for the coming year. Crediting is one of the how people join the union is one of the topics that comes up over and over again. But to answer your question, I would join the union. Is there any other is there any other profession where if we were a professional and there was an association that represented us as professionals, where we would say, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go off and be like, you know, an independent surgeon or whatever it is. Like, I would join you. That's the short and long answer. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit more about getting options, like for scripts? Like, so you write it, then what do you do next?
Okay. Well, I don't know what everybody does, but I can tell you what I have done.
What would you do next?
So I go to industry events. I, you know, as you heard it somewhere in there, I'm a member of WIFT. I'm a member of the Canadian Academy. I go to Canadian Screen Week. I go and I try to meet producers. If it's a project that I know is beyond my scope of being able to produce, as in my short film, then I go and I try and find somebody who has some synchronicity with that project, who, you know, knows how to access the funds that can help me get that project done. I even at one point used an app called Shaper to meet a producer, and I did successfully meet this producer, and I did go through a long period of negotiation on an option agreement that eventually fell through. But, you know, I basically, I do the thing that I was never able to do as an actor, which is really weird, which is I network and I go out and I try to sell my, you know, Liz Taylor here, this wonderful actor who I met at TIFF, she networks as an actor. I never did that. It's a really strange thing, but I am able to do that for my writing for some random reason. I guess it's not me, it's separate from me, therefore I can sell it, I don't know. But basically you have to meet somebody who is passionate about your project. You can go, the first thing I try to do is go through networks first without producers. And I got some great reads, and I got long consideration on a project actually at CBC 2 years ago after Banff. And ultimately after like a really quite lengthy process, they came back and they said, we are developing too much content in this lane right now. Broadcasters in Canada don't have a lot of money. So, you know, everybody's looking for you to find money or to be able to unlock financing in some way before they want to hop onto that as well. So I think producers are a really important piece of the pie.
So when you go to an event, you don't pitch, I mean, your idea right away, right? I mean, you must talk to the person.
Chat. Okay. So what do you do? What do you do in the industry? What are your producer? What kind of stuff do you do? And then if there's a synchronicity there, then, you know, I might say, I have this project that you might be interested in hearing about. It's called Avon Calling. It's about generations of women who have changed their lives by selling beauty products, but more importantly, business opportunity to women just like them. Log line, really quick, really short. And then if the conversation continues from there, it does. If it doesn't, you know, it's nice talking to you, it's nice learning about your projects, you move on to the next person.
Awesome. Well, I think we need to wrap things up. Thank you so much, T, for being here.
So I appreciate all those stories that we saw earlier on. So I want you to all give it up for the film, What About Us?
Shelley, Jared,
And Jared Seeker.
fantastic. And you guys want to say something?
Okay.
I think Shelley will handle any Q&A because we want to keep it brief. I'll just say it in 3 points that would sort of lay out the groundwork. This is not a character-driven movie. This is a plot or issue-driven movie. And that is very different, especially being a factual documentary. And there is no story arc. In fact, there's 8 stories. But the reason that we wanted to do the stories is, first of all, you probably noticed all 5 major cultural backgrounds are represented. That was intentional. And secondly, you probably noticed that everybody came back and had a final scene. That was intentional because we wanted to have an uplifting ending so that we could continue to show this in community settings and film festivals like this, because we want this to be part of a larger discussion, either symposium or conference or panel discussion, where we get to the root cause of what this really is. This movie was for 4 groups of women. And I'm sure you agree with me that Huey, who was sitting here and had to leave just 10 minutes ago, every one of them had to sacrifice a lot to get to this point. But you can't build a house without a foundation. You have to heal first. And you notice that each one of these women were in a different part of healing. And that's because they're representing other women. So as great as what they did was, this story was not about them, and it's not really for them. Think of the iceberg. How much of it do you see and how much is under the surface? This movie is for 4 groups of women. First of all, the group of women who've never been abused yet. Some of them may see signs in their partner that they may avoid traumatic times, years, decades, a lifetime ahead of them. This is for the women who are in abuse and are too afraid to do anything. These are for the women who are out of the abuse, but it's so raw and so new that they are too traumatized to say anything. And this is for the group of women who can't say anything because they haven't survived. That's why this movie had to be made. And these women that are in the movie are vanguards, ambassadors for all those voiceless ones who can't speak yet, who don't know they're going to speak, or who never will be able to speak. And that's my point. The Q&A can be done with the other producer who is the creator of this and who probably can speak a lot more organically with some of the points you want to make, and that's Shelley.
Does anybody have any questions? Sure.
You want me to ask?
Yeah.
Maybe, sure.
So this is the part where you have the chance to ask any questions you would like. Okay, guys? So if you'd like to ask anything, you could just raise your hands.
I have a question.
Sure.
And I didn't want to say it before when I talked to you, but how did you find those women? How did you connect with those women? And how did you help them to open themselves and tell something so personal? Because this is personal.
Yeah, very. Okay, I think we just got really lucky. But I am also a publisher. I'm a founder and publisher of a magazine, an image, lifestyle, and business magazine. And in our magazines, we cover a lot of stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And so here comes Me Too in the media. I think Oprah Winfrey did the famous Golden Globe speech, and she talked about high-profile women that were having some of these same problems, and women in the political arena. And then I thought to myself, well, what about our communities? This is happening and nobody's talking about it. Here's my opportunity to do something about it. And to be honest, I had no idea that I'd be doing this project because it was another project I was doing. And I have a social work background, by the way. So when I saw this, I said, okay, I have to do this. And because of the social work background that I had, I think everything sort of like came full forth. I felt an obligation that having the media platform, here's my opportunity to take a look at our communities and start talking about it. So that's how the project came about.
Just one other thing, when she said, when I saw this, we actually published a story about it in the magazine, and half of the cast were members of the people who were interviewed on the magazine. The other half were basically recruited by us.
Yes. Once they were telling you their stories, you didn't feel like a little bit shocked, a little bit uncomfortable, you know, that because they're literally open they're sold to you?
Yeah, well, like Andrew said, I knew none of the women actually because one of our writers, she was the one that we asked her to go in the community and find some women that had some of these problems, and so I didn't know them. But I felt in order to make these women comfortable, I invited them to my home, and that's where we got the information. We did the initial interview with them to qualify them for the vision that I had, what I wanted to do. And so that's how they got comfortable being at our home. So they came to our home a few times because we did the promo video. It was done right at my home because of budgeting. We didn't have money to, like rent a studio, so we created our home right into a studio and we did the video. And and then I went into their homes to, obviously they gained my trust, and with the social work background, I do a lot of listening. I did a lot of listening. But some of the stories were so hard for me. A couple of times I had to leave the set and just had a good cry because the stories were a bit heavy for me. But like I said, having the social work background, I played my role where I just listened and I was able to comfort them when I can and so forth, yeah.
Do you have other projects?
I have many more projects. Just need financing to get them out, yeah. Because this was all out of pocket. Like I said, it's my first project. I had no idea that I'd be doing it, but it took us 11 months to do it. 11 months from the time we started to, a lot of interviews, a lot of meetings. And and it took us like 2 days of filming.
Three and a half.
3.5 days of filming and 30. How many hours of footage?
10.5 hours.
10.5 hours of footage narrowed down. There were just so many, so long, so we had to cut it down. As you can see, it's a 95 minutes, it's a full documentary. We still want to do some additional editing and so forth, so yeah.
But how did you decide what should be cut and what should stay?
Well, maybe he can answer that, Andrew can answer that, but I had a vision of what I wanted to look like, what the results I want. Like Andrew said, this is not character driven. It's about the issue. I want to start the conversation. And each screening that we do, we always have a panel discussion where I bring in the professionals to let's start talking about getting how women can start speaking, how to break the silence, and get some, some government things in to start helping these women, some resources, because a lot of times you can't make somebody leave their spouse, but what you can do is provide the resources, and when they feel empowered enough to do it, at least they have the resources there. So that's my goal, is more is education and awareness that there is help available. But as we know, it's an uphill battle, because from my understanding, many of if women want to leave, many of the shelters, you could only stay there for like 6 weeks, and you got to keep shelter hopping, and that's a challenge in itself. So women just decide to stay instead of leaving and have to take the kids out of school, and it's a lot. It's a lot, but at least if we can start to re-educate the younger generation. We're probably set in our ways already, but if we can catch the high school kids or younger kids, and re-education of our boys and our girls, how what's acceptable, what is not, how we should behave towards each other. So it's about re-educating.
Yeah, that actually was one of my questions, because I was wondering how, or what's the plan to get this maybe into schools, to
colleges.
have the younger people see that,
Yes.
rather, colleges,
Yes.
universities,
Yeah.
even secondary school.
Yes. Yeah, we're working on that. We want to do some additional editing and bring in some more statistics and some more professionals to talk about this, it's a real issue that we need to take. Real communities, the community got to get involved to start talking about it. And this is where some of the changes and policy change, and that's where the changes start to occur.
Yeah. One of the things I thought was that perhaps this could be done in 2 parts rather than one long part.
Okay, it's a bit intense.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. There are some really intense moments
Yes.
there, and especially if you're thinking of the younger people, they won't sit through all of that.
No. Well, it's for now. It's for 18 and up because
The attention span, regardless. Right?
yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly. So those are some of the changes that because we've had some feedback and we wanted to do some get some statistics. So that's a good point actually.
Any other questions? Anyone?
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
How long did it take for
Post-production?
Post-production, yeah.
3 months, three and a half months.
Okay.
Because we had to take 10 and a half hours of film down to, we wanted to get it down to between 1 and 2 hours. Had no concept of what it was going to take, but we wanted to get a story that had a beginning, middle, and end with each one of the women. And so we did the first editing, and it came down to an hour 45. We wrote, so we pretty close. So
Right.
now we just question just sharpening a few edges and running with it to see what it looked like, and then knowing what we needed to do to just finish it off.
So, how long did it take you to watch all that raw footage and
hours?
Story editing.
For 10 and a half hours to actually do it and edit it, there was probably at least, I would say, half a dozen days that I sat down in front of the computer after breakfast, and I didn't realize what time it was till it was dinner, and the whole day went. So, yeah, and that probably happened at least half a dozen times. But it's very important for you to capture the essence of what these women are going to, and sometimes they needed to digress just in order to catch their breath and go into the next point, and you have to sort of realize what they were doing while they were talking. It's not that they were just talking for the story, they were talking for themselves, because they're trying to get the courage to say the next important thing that's going to happen, and the next important thing, and you had to realize this is a way for them to finally get it out after all these years of keeping it in. So you knew that the information you really wanted was coming in waves, and you had to be patient and wait for the next one to come. And it made it for Toronto, because I probably, 10 and a half hours, I probably actually saw about 25 to 30 hours when it came down to seeing things over and over and over again. But it's good for me, and it's good, I think, for a lot of men, because you can say you support women and you stand behind them, but you sometimes have to realize you have to stand with them. And I can only imagine what some of them are going through, because I got pretty close to some of them and to their story, and it traumatized me to some extent in some days. So,
well, thank you for making this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Somebody have a question?
Just wanted to say thank you for caring so much
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
for shining the spotlight,
Yeah.
for being so patient. And I'm sure it must have been very cathartic for them to speak
Yeah.
about it, and they're on their road to progress.
Yeah, it takes a lot of
So
caring.
thank you for that.
And sharing and caring, and just still follow up how you're doing, and at least at the same time give them their space to heal. Because I'm just the producer doing the story, I can't get too involved. It's their story, but it's for every person, for the voiceless, the women that have passed on that didn't make it to even speak, so.
It's not only that, sometimes when they speak, people don't believe us.
Well, yeah.
They're like, she's, so that's why it's really very important
a lot
to
of
feel
different
like
dynamics,
that.
But the goal is to make women comfortable. Yes, we have a safe space here that you can come and let's start the conversation. So if that's my calling, I'm all for it. I'm happy to do it, right?
And one thing I just want to say, our magazine is Image, Lifestyle, and Business, but we have a little word in front of it called diverse. And it was really important for us to have all 5 cultural backgrounds represented, because we wanted to show that this is an issue that may look different in different cultures, but it actually is the same thing. It's sort of like translating, and when you translate abuse, it's the same words no matter what language you speak. And we wanted people to understand that the difference between men and women look different in different cultures, but they're actually the same, and there's the systemic problems that exist in the way boys and girls are raised may look different in different cultures, but it's the same conflicts. It just looks different when you look at the different cultures, but it's the same thing. And now, like, our grandparents would have never met, and here we are in a relationship. Most of us would have never seen each other 2 or 3 generations ago. Now we live in a very diverse society. We have to learn to live in a diverse society, to appreciate each other, to understand each other's differences, and to celebrate our similarities. And it begins with understanding our sexuality. Thank you for staying, and
thank you for staying. Thank you. Thank you, Shelly. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you, really thank you for sharing all those stories, those powerful stories. And I myself, I have to say, I've learned quite a bit from, especially the very first one, the Sicilian, I did not know that the culture was in such a way where the boys and the men had to treat their mothers in such a way that was not appropriate. Thank you so much. Please give a round of applause again for this movie, What About Us? We have come to the end of the night, but I do want to invite you to stay for the after party if you're still up for it, okay? Thank you so much for staying, and have a wonderful night.
I love your documentary. Oh, thank you so much. It's a labor of love. I've cried. This is my time. I've cried every time I see it. The stories are incredible. That's a little portion of the story. We edited out even more.